It can come as quite a shock to find that Sheffield has a medieval heritage, and that some of the most famous names in English history have connections with the city. It also surprised you to find that Sheffield was once the site of one of the largest castles in the north of England, but there again perhaps it shouldn't, since apart from a few names in the city centre, virtually all traces of the castle disappeared over 300 years ago. The site of the castle was where the current castle market stands today, tucked in between Waingate, the River Don as it passes under Ladies Bridge, and the River Sheaf, which these days runs under the outdoor Sheaf Market. But before it was a castle, there is strong evidence from excavations in the late 1920s that the last Saxon Earl of Northumbria, Waltheof II, had a hall on the same site. This may have been fortified, since the River Sheaf acted as part of the border between the kingdoms of Northumbria and Mercia at that time. In fact, the word sheaf is derived from the Old English for border or division, and is where Sheffield gets its name. Curiously, this same small river was also part of the border between the counties of Yorkshire and Derbyshire until well into the 20th century. After William I's conquest in 1066, Waltheof, despite marrying the conqueror's niece Judith, rose up against the king and was caught and beheaded in 1076. Through Judith's line, the area of Sheffield passed to William de Lovato, the Lord of Hallamshire, in Henry I's reign, and it was he who built the first castle on the site, made of timber and earthworks, as well as the first Ladies' Bridge over the Don nearby, and a hospital on Spittal Hill. Extensive orchards, fishing ponds and a deer park were also developed. City names referring to these today are still familiar relics from this period. In 1204, de Lovato's great-granddaughter Maud married into the Furnival family, another name which still crops up around the city. For his support in the civil wars against Simon de Montfort, when the original castle and most of the buildings in Sheffield were destroyed by fire in 1266, Henry III granted Thomas de Furnival a charter to rebuild the castle in 1270, but this time in stone, and with permission to add defensive crenellations to the walls. This was an important gesture. A powerful lord and a large castle could represent a serious threat to the monarchy. Making the castle impregnable was a sign how much Henry III trusted in Thomas de Furnival's loyalty, and how much he needed him to stand up to less trustworthy noblemen. This illustration shows how it is thought the castle would have looked when first completed. The view is from a position roughly above the junction where Angel Street meets High Street today. The north and east sides were bounded by the rivers Don and Sheaf. You can see Ladies' Bridge at the top left. Around the rest of the castle is a moat or a ditch. The large bastion tower and gatehouse is to the right, facing south with the drawbridge over the moat, opening onto roughly where Exchange Street is today. The overall circumference of the main structure was thought to be between 500 and 600 metres, with an area of 1.75 hectares. That's approximately 3 full-size football pitches. This was large enough, for instance, to garrison a troop of 350 cavalry, their horses and equipment during the civil wars of 1640s. In the 14th century, it seems, Furnival's castle and much of Sheffield fell into disrepair, possibly as a result of the diseases which swept the country, but was saved when, through marriage, it was taken over by one of the most famous knights of 15th century England, John Talbot, the first Earl of Shrewsbury, who restored the castle to full strength. It's possible the outer enclosure shown here was then added up to Dixon Lane and may even have stretched as far as Fitzallen Square. In 1570, Sheffield Castle became effectively a jail for Mary, Queen of Scots, who arrived with most of her court retinue and was held there by George Talbot, the 6th Earl of Shrewsbury, for 14 years at the command of Elizabeth I, who feared Mary or her Catholic supporters might take over her throne and return England to Catholicism. In the English civil wars of the 1640s, the castle eventually fell to parliamentary forces and paid for 500 years of loyalty to the English throne. In July 1647, a resolution was passed in the House of Commons for the castle to be made untenable, in other words, demolished. And from then on, the history of the city of Sheffield changed irrevocably. Given the huge size of the structure, where did all the materials go? The timber, lead and glass is known to have been sold off. Some of the best facing stone went into the new grammar school, built in 1648 near Townhead Street, and almost certainly more went into other buildings at the time. But it is likely the remainder, probably mainly rubble fill, was used in lime kilns, tipped into the moat, or was just levelled out. This illustration, for example, shows just how high today's level is above the original castle ground level. Let's hope when Castle Market finally moves to its new premises at the other end of the city in 2013, archaeologists can be finally allowed to examine the site and shed far more light on Sheffield's fascinating medieval past.